Welcome back, everyone. My name is Timothy Fair-Matthews, and this is the F10X Academy, and we're here with David Daly, our Academy Accountant. Just to give you guys, if you're tuning in for the first time, who David Daly is, he is from the company Gulf Tax Accounting Group, which is known as GTAG, and he has over 20 years global experience in transformational environments across a broad range of industries. 14 at an executive level, and most recently has been based in the Middle East for the last 12 years. He writes for the papers, and he has practical experience in VAT, finance, project management, business turnaround, treasury, audit, IT systems, the list goes on. So, David, thank you so much for coming back, mate. This is your third one now, so really appreciate the time. How are you?
It is, Tim. Good to see you again. I'm glad you managed to get Seb out of the hot seat. Oh, no, you were.
Of course, yeah. No,
Sorry, I'm getting my order wrong. My apologies.
How's your week gone? Everything all right?
Busy. I mean, the economy is definitely starting to unwind, certainly on the Dubai side, even to an extent in Abu Dhabi. What's happening up there is more about controlling the contagion rather than trying to fence up the economy. For those who don't require movement between the two, business is carrying on, and things are starting to open up. I think the key thing we got to, from a signaling point of view, is when we are allowed to travel within the GCC without quarantining country to country. I think that'll be a big signal to us in terms of where we are.
Amazing. So you would say Dubai is a little bit further ahead in the economy compared to Abu Dhabi at the minute?
Oh, that's a tough one. We're definitely further ahead in terms of the virus, purely because we had our lockdown, 6 to 8 weeks ago. So we've been through the worst of it. Abu Dhabi has just been hit with it now. I know there's enough stories going around. I think there's general agreement on where the issues are. The issues are with older people with who are immunodepressed, and that seems to hit two particular categories in this country. And again, I don't think anybody doesn't understand who fits within those groups. So Abu Dhabi is going through it now. The question is, has Sharjah, Ras Al Khaimah still to have that? Because I don't get the impression they've had it. More luck to them, and I hope they don't. But as we're heading into the summer, and we can see it more globally, it does seem to be in retreat. That's allowing for the likes of Brazil and in the southern hemisphere where the seasons are changing.
Right, amazing. Well, that's encouraging news. So a big relief.
Remember to cough in. Remember to cough into your hands. I show you that.
Are you okay? You haven't got the virus, have you, mate?
No, I haven't got the virus. I haven't had a proper flu in about 20 years, so no, I'm good.
Well, that's good. So, I mean, the topic of today is not about whether or not David does have the virus, but it's actually about garbage in, garbage out, which is known as GIGO or GIGO, I think how people pronounce it. So just for those that don't know what that term means, it's essentially comes from a computer science term where the input quality is, the output quality is measured by the input quality. And David has decided to center this talk around this topic because it's an incredibly, important aspect I think we need to look at our business from time to time with what we're inputting in terms of our accounting data. And now that we're in a reset phase, it should be really interesting to see what actions people can be taken to improve that process. So, David, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to send a talk around this today and what you're noticing with the change of businesses with regards to finances.
Okay. We're an odd species. We take more care of our pets and our cars than we do of ourselves. For example, you get your car serviced once a year or once a quarter or whatever type of car you might have. Therefore, you get somebody to look at it and make sure that it's in good condition and keeps working. If your pet is looking slightly off, you bring him to the vet. You probably bring him to the vet once a year in any case. We are in business when things get tough, which they are at the moment for the vast majority of businesses. What we typically do, instead of casting the net around to see what help can be or to sound out what it is we should be doing, we tend to focus ever more on the particular skill set that we have. And that particular skill set is what's at the core of your business, which is why you set it up in the first place, because you've got particular competency in a given skill. Now, speaking as an accountant, and I don't know how many accountants are going to be listening to this, we typically live in a normal SME environment at the end of the stream. So from when you start engaging or marketing to engage with customers, engaging with customers, delivering the product the way through. Finance typically and accounting come in at the end when the invoicing is done, when the money's being chased. And it's a little bit, it can be a little bit late at that point if you've been focusing on what it is that you do, excluding out the finance element of that. And I've spoken about this before, there's a very broad range of skills. And it's one of the advantages larger organizations have. They got the marketeer at the start. They got the technical pre-sales people. They've got the advertising people. They've got HR to ensure that the right people with the right skills have got the right training are in place in the right place, hopefully. You got the right operations type people. You got the right finance people looking at things from an overarching point of view. You got the right legal people to make sure contractually everything's in place, et cetera, et cetera. IT have got the right systems in place to help support the process from one end to another. In reality, as in an SME, you don't have those luxuries. So there's certain things you can kind of do without, and there are. There's certain things which you can run simply enough so it works. Accounting is a little bit more tricky. And certainly now that we've got a couple of complexities thrown into the mix, we've now got VAT. We've now got a crunch, which is leading to a cash drain in the general economy. People are finding it difficult to get paid. So you may deem your success factor to be how well you're selling. Well, that's one element of it. But if you're not getting paid in time, or it's mightn't get paid at all, you've got that loss of working capital, because the likelihood is that you've spent money to actually generate that income in the first place. Now, it might just be services, but that's still your time, which you could have been doing, could have spent doing something else. You do need some type of an accountant, unless you're good enough and have that skill set. And if you do, good and good for you. If you don't, you probably outsource it to somebody, or you might be big enough to have somebody internally. Now, that person needs to be your partner. And we always hear about your partner, I'm your partner, and this, that, and the other. But it's somebody you've got to be able to pick up the phone to and sound out. And I mean, Tim and I have been working together for a while. And Tim will tell you, if he's got a question, he'll just ring me or he'll message me and we'll chat it out. And that's partly what I'm there for. I do the finance and VAT for them, but at the same time, they might just want my opinion on something, which I'll give, and they don't have to accept it, but I'll give an honest opinion, and I'm not afraid to give that opinion. And in a lot of cases out here, people are afraid to give opinions and won't. And a lot of that is down to the confidence of the individual or how they see their role in terms of working with you. We're in an environment, in terms of the challenges from a finance point of view, cash is critical. So it's engaging in business where you know you're going to get paid. It's understanding what you do if you're not going to be. And again, this is where you're talking to your accountant. What happens? I've got this deal. This is the value. This is how it sits vis-a-vis the size of my business more generally. How much of my cash is it going to lock up? How much of my time is it going to lock up? And you may know all these questions yourself in your mind, but when you're sitting there trying to decide whether or not to go forward with something, because of the pressures that exist today, they're likely to get pushed aside as you focus on your core skill set, which is what got you into business in the first place and what you're trying to drive forward, and they just get pushed aside.
Yeah,
you know what these things are. Absolutely. The other thing which is happening now is VAT audits are starting to appear. And it's interesting how they're being done. I've got one with a client at the moment, and I believe that he's probably been selected not so much for them wanting to test his business, but because of where he sits vis-a-vis the that business vertical. So what's been quite obvious is they're looking for information as to what's happening downstream from where he is. And it became very obvious very quickly that there are problems downstream. There's always going to be an issue within your own business, be it small. If you've got the right type of advice, at least you're not going to be facing any of the bigger ones. But this is an entry point, and the tax authorities will do these types of things. They are reasonable, but again, it's one of those, if you've never been through an audit, you don't know what's involved, you don't understand their powers, and their powers are extreme. I'd rather deal with the border police than deal with the customs or the VAT people. They have more power. They can just turn up at your house 24 hours a day with the cops. That's just the reality. And by the way, I'm not picking on the UAE here. This is any place in the world where you're dealing with customs and excise. Anywhere, Britain, Ireland, Germany,
they sound quite
States.
menacing. Have you got any horror stories so far that you've heard in terms of VAT laws or things going wrong here?
Yeah, here's an interesting one for you. Health insurance. In Abu Dhabi, you can reclaim VAT on an employee and up to 3 dependents. In fact, the law states that you must provide health insurance for your employee and up to 3 dependents. If there's 4 kids, you've only got to provide for 4 in total, including the employee. In Dubai, only for the employee.
Right.
And in Northern Emirates, you don't have to provide it at all. Now, what that means is the VAT man has decided that you can only reclaim VAT on that which you are legally obliged to provide. So in Abu Dhabi, you can reclaim the VAT on the employee and up to 3 dependents. If those same people were in Dubai, employed and hired, and all had the same package, you wouldn't be able to reclaim it on the dependents. And in the Northern Emirates, you wouldn't reclaim any of the VAT. And that's not where I'm coming to with this story. You can claim VAT on any Emirati employee anywhere in the country.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
That's because the VAT law talks about being able to reclaim VAT on those things where you are mandated by visa to do so. The problem is, of course, Emiratis don't need a visa.
No.
Therefore, they don't get caught in that, and therefore Emiratis, if you have them as employees, probably unlikely in an SME environment like this, you can't reclaim the VAT. So now what we're seeing is effectively 4 different treatments for the same thing across the same country, with 3 different treatments in different Emirates. And I'm just giving you this by way of example, because these are the tricky things. And by the way, the law's full of it. And this is where you need help, because it's not easy. And it's not easy even for us as the so-called experts to stay on top of this stuff, because they're just finding it out as well. This only came out about 6-7 months ago. I haven't seen anything in the press. There'll be court cases over it, I can guarantee you that much. But this is what you're dealing with. And it's having that support, it's having that conversation, it's having that person who you're working with, and you tell them you're doing something, and they go, whoa, 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 something has changed you need to be aware of. Now, this could be, I don't know, 1 hour conversation a month. It doesn't have to be many days or weeks or something like that, but it's important to have those conversations, to be open and frank about it, and to take the advice on board. It is ultimately up to you as an SME business owner to decide whether that's the case or not.
Okay. Well, I mean, focusing on a little bit on the claiming of things. Is the claiming of that back the same process it would be anywhere else in the world, or is it different for this country? And what things can you claim back and not claim? Like, is there certain things you think a lot of businesses are not doing or should be doing, etc.?
No, it's pretty much the same anywhere in the world. The slight difference here is that we're part of a VAT union, a VAT framework, the GCC VAT framework, which isn't up yet, but it technically exists. So we have, from the EU, we've inherited what's called reverse charge mechanism. So this is where you make purchases from abroad. Now, a lot of people, actually, this is one of the fun ones I come across. People go, I don't make any purchases from abroad. And I go, do you advertise on LinkedIn or Facebook? And they go, yes. I said, you're getting an invoice from Dublin, most likely. That's Ireland. And you're going to get invoiced in dollars. And I went, oh, yeah, you're right. And again, it's because that's just one of those things I know, because it's what I do. It's what I'm good at. The other person I'm talking to might be a great marketeer. They just haven't thought about it. What that means is the treatment's different and the reporting of it is different. You've got to get these things right. And it's annoying because it's bureaucracy. And this is the most annoying thing for SMEs. And I do understand it because I hear it going, this isn't helping me achieve my bottom line and make money. And you're going, you're right, it isn't. What it is doing is ensuring when the audit comes, you don't get penalties and you don't throw money away. I mean, it's 3,000 to 5,000 dirham per incident where you get things wrong. If you haven't you're not keeping proper records. I'm currently supporting an entity, which is a 2018 entity, which didn't bother to do accounting at all. registered for VAT. I'm still trying to figure out why and how, and hasn't reported once. So I'm having to reconstruct their accounts from scratch with every bit of paper I can get my hands on. I'm still trying to get access to the portal page where you do your reporting because I'm not too sure they know what the password is. And so we can get through these things. I mean, it's 1,000 dirham missing the first return, 2 for the second, and then interest is charged from the day that the monies were due. And this adds up and quickly. Remember, it's 365% per year. Okay? So if you owe 10,000 dirham and a year later you go around to paying it, you're going to have to pay another 365%. It's really, really material, these fees. So, or these penalties. So you have to be on top of it. So when I say garbage in, garbage out, what I mean is it's those parts of your business which aren't important now, and it can feel like that. Think about doctors. I mean, I dread to be a doctor or a dentist. They tend to end up seeing patients at the point at which the patient has no choice but to get treatment. When you go down and you've got a lump the size of your wrist off your wrist, and they're going, where the hell were you when that was the size of a pencil? Yeah. You know, you've got a giant tumor, you're going to be dead in 2 months. And it's a bit like that. You eventually do get people coming to you going, help. And you're going, okay, when did the problem start? And you look into it and go, my God, that started months ago, or even in this case, a couple of years ago. And part of the reason for this is, as I say, people go down the rabbit hole. They focus on what it is they're good at. And in the current environment where things are difficult, people will do that even more so. And they'll feel, I am working so hard to drive my business, to ensure my business succeeds and survives. And they're doing so in this manner by focusing on it, working maybe twice as hard. The problem is they're storing up tomorrow's issues. And I understand where people go, well, that's tomorrow's problem. I've got today's problems to deal with. And I get that. And as I say, at the same time, it doesn't have to distract you materially away from what you're doing. And in any case, forest for trees, it's not a bad thing to take your eyes off for a very short time what it is you're concentrating on to give you a fresh set of eyes when you come back.
No, of course. I mean, a lot of most SMEs, people that don't know, anyone watching that's not in the country, I think most SMEs in the country will know this. I think it's a 400,000 bracket, isn't it, before you have to register for VAT here? Is that correct?
375,000 you must register, and that's if your turnover is 375 in a 12-month period, not in a year, 12-month period, any 12-month period.
Right. So that being said, then this ties in perfectly to what I think you were saying earlier about, you know, most SMEs try to do everything themselves. Just because you're not registered for VAT right now doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking extreme care with what you're putting in terms of your records, because it's going to come back and bite you if and when you become over that 375 bracket. And to be fair, if we're all in business to make money, we're going to be reaching that bracket at some point anyway. So very, very important.
The other part of that is it's getting into good habits.
Yeah.
I can understand when you start out and you just got maybe a little bit of business here and there, you're running everything off a spreadsheet. I totally understand that. I get it. And we're all guilty of that. I mean, when we set up our business, okay, the accounting was done as it should be, but then we're accountants. Was the marketing done in a very good form? Not particularly. We're not marketeers, we're accountants. But it is trying to get the best solution that you possibly can in place, given where your business is at a point in time, allowing for the fact that you haven't got the money to get every single thing you want, and that's fine. But what you can still do is you can still get that sounding post, and it shouldn't be that expensive if you do it properly.
No, of course. Guys, anyone watching, just to prompt you guys, if you've got any questions around this, anything to do with accounting, VAT, anything in the country, please pop them in the comment box. We'll be getting to questions later on in the video. So David, just kind of again, bouncing off that, if someone, let's hypothetically talk, let's talk a realistic problem here. Not many people get people like yourselves involved in the early stages. So what can people do themselves, and what would you recommend is a good way of going to learn about how to do it properly? Is there any resources, assets online, things that they can do themselves, or do you highly, strongly not recommend it?
Unless you understand fundamentally what you're doing, I wouldn't. It's a bit like just because you can wire a plug doesn't mean you're an electrician. I don't even wire plugs because I'm crap at that too. At the house down. The internet, in a way, has democratized things and given us additional ways to be dangerous. It can seem very simple to use a system to raise an invoice on a customer. God, that was easy. I created a customer and I raised an invoice. Wow, simple, lovely, happy days. And that part is, in fairness, and your supplier invoice is the other way. Well, it's just the other way around. That seems fairly straightforward. I'm good. And then you feel, oh, I'm actually not too bad. Now, have you configured that particular system? And there are plenty of online systems, very cheap. The one we recommend, Xero, is very cheap. It's a great system. But have you configured the invoice template so it's legal from a VAT compliance point of view? Does it have all the different aspects of a tax invoice? Have you set up the code required to capture for tax purposes? So when you're reporting for VAT, that it captures the different elements which you need to catch, i.e., has it got the Abu Dhabi VAT, has it got charge of VAT, how does it deal with reverse charge mechanism, etc. If you're dealing with goods and your VAT your number is linked to your customs number, do you know how to deal with that in the FTA portal? So they're just examples. And the more complicated piece, which people forget about, is at some point you've got to reconcile the bank, which means you've got to bring your bank statement into your accounting system, and you've got to match off the items on your bank statement against monies that go in, against the invoices raised and the invoices received. And actually, they're the tricky bits. And if you start getting things like that wrong, well, how are you going to undo it? I mean, if you fundamentally don't understand it, you're probably not going to be able to, and all the videos in the world aren't going to help you. So that's one of those things we're getting right. Now, if you're that simple a business, you might be able to get away with it for a while, and in a lot of cases you will. In many cases you won't, and all you're doing is storing up tomorrow's problem, and it's not worth it. I mean, the one thing I would always say to people in accounting terms is your accounting solution from a cost point of view is based on the amount of paper, the amount of entries involved. For a lot of SMEs, there aren't a lot. There might only be 2 invoices a month, and there might only be maybe 4 invoices off that, in which case your solution is relatively cheap. People are afraid to ask because they're expecting things to be in the high thousands. It's not really. So it's worth a conversation. It's worth a coffee.
Yeah, of course.
So
you just mentioned about, is there any other softwares other than Xero that people could potentially
there is. QuickBooks. The issue with QuickBooks is there's country versions. There's nothing wrong with it as a system. I would strongly say, unless you really do know your accounting, don't do QuickBooks. It's a good system. I'm not knocking QuickBooks at all. There is Zoho, which some people use. Zoho's like a mini ERP almost. It's again a very, very good system. It really is nothing wrong with Zoho at all. But again, the more complex these systems get, the more knives and pointy things that are sticking out of it to create problems you don't even know you have because you don't understand what happened when you press that button. So Xero's complex enough. QuickBooks, depending on the country version, adds additional complexity which you weren't aware of. And Zoho, wow, well, you're into a different world there. You can go down to much more simpler places. What's it called? There's a free system. The hell's the name of it? It's got some kind of beach name. Again, not terrible, but this system allows you to just delete things without you even knowing you've done it. You can literally just, and then it's gone. And by the way, it only deletes 1/2 of it. So remember, in accounting, everything's double entry. Whatever happens here happens there. In this system, it allows you to make one side disappear. And by the way, it disappears permanently. You have no way to trace what happened. So you run into these kind of problems, which you're just not aware of. Now, I'm sure if you get a marketer here on here, an IT person on here, they'll tell you the same horror stories, but in a different professional context. And we've all got them.
It sounds like
want to tell one of your horror stories about the type of thing I might do if I went playing with an edit. Oh, there we go. I decide to go and do an edit. Can you imagine how much fun you'd have looking over my shoulder at this discrete which I can destroy as much as I like without doing any real damage, and you were just there going, oh my God, what's he doing?
I know. Well, to be honest, you never know. It might be a hidden talent, David. You might be a fantastic editor. You just haven't tried. Anyway, so moving on. Let's try and give us the walkthrough steps. So let's take an SME as an example. Someone who's, let's say, just started or come up with an idea during this crisis, because there's going to be a lot of businesses that are coming out of this pandemic. It's not going to be all gloom. What are the kind of fundamental steps you recommend someone goes down to ensuring that their books are 100% accurate and they're ready for VAT compliance, hopefully when they reach that 375,000 market? What are the steps?
So once you've got your business plan done, and these are all high level numbers, it should look forward 5 years, always, at least 5 years. And remember, it's only a plan, so it's going to change. From an accounting point of view, at that stage, your accounting solution is fairly straightforward. I mean, if you're doing one invoice a month for the first 12 months, you can do it in Excel. Keep proper records, keep paper copies of everything. If you're doing more, you really want to be thinking about moving on to some kind of normal accounting system. As I say, the zero is about what, $30 a month or something. It's not a big cost. That's a few pints of beer. You need to get it set up for you, so you need somebody to do that. They can show you how to do enough of it. The problem I find when you train somebody how to use the system because they decide they want to use it themselves is when you get into those things like bank reconciliations and the other items that I was talking about, they realize, oh, okay, this is a bit more complicated than I thought. And the fear is at startup is you're trying to mitigate cost, but you can do deals. And as I say at the start, the paperwork's not that heavy. The other side is once you're engaged with an accountant, you've now got a sounding board. You've got somebody you can ping a message to. Most of the queries I get from my customers are quick queries, which I can just respond back to, typically on WhatsApp. We WhatsApp back in and out. If somebody wants, we'll have a chat, we'll have a coffee. It's not a big deal. Now, it's not a formal part of the service that we do. We're really doing the accounting. But I don't mind having a couple of minutes of a chat and sounding an idea out. More than happy to do that. Think of it like this. My success is your success. Or your success, rather, is my success. Sorry, we're not being selfish for a moment. If a business comes to the likes of me or comes to you, and actually this applies to anybody listening to this,
it does, yeah.
I want my customers to succeed, because if they do, then they'll do more things. If they're doing more things, they'll need more of me. I want my customers to grow. I want all my customers to come back and be 100% bigger next year. That means they're going to need additional support. That means my business grows as well. So it's in my interest to point something out to you if I think you're going to go the wrong way. I don't want you to go the wrong way. That's inane. It's insane. It's a pure insanity. You're there to help.
Very true. Very true.
And by the way, if you're wondering, well, how do you cost that out? There's an element of marketing in there. Yeah, okay, you might be getting paid for it, but hey, it took 5 minutes of your time, or maybe even 10 minutes. That's okay. If their business doubles next year, happy days. Happy days for everybody. And that is getting involved that's getting involved in the value chain. And also it means that SME that you're working with, or that entity you're working with, can focus on what it is they do, knowing they've got a sounding board for that blind spot which they have. It means they can now go down the rabbit hole without worrying as much.
So true. We had a really interesting interview yesterday with Spencer Lodge. I'm not sure if you checked it, but Spencer put a really good, interesting way to look at things. Is that a lot of entrepreneurs are not entrepreneurs; they're actually slaves to their business. You take a man in a corner shop, for example, and he used this exact story. If his apartment's above it, and if he keeps the door open downstairs 24/7, he's going to have potential money coming in all the time. So he sits behind the till. I mean, that's not entrepreneurial at all. He's a slave to the business. He's an employee. And I think if we can look at our time as the most valuable commodity here, if we can outsource and streamline something which is relatively quite simple for you but complex for us, then obviously you can earn more and do more what you do and what you're best at. So it's obviously a no-brainer. We do have a couple of questions. I'm just going to lead on to them, if that's all right, David. Sure. Not linked around VAT, but we do have Stuart here. I think he's from the UK. He just said, hi, David, what do you expect trading will be like for self-employed businesses over the next year following COVID? because a lot of people are talking about the recession hasn't even hit yet. So this is still to come.
Okay.
So what your
Well, Tim, to your point, has the recession hit? Yes, it has actually. We've been heading into the recession that we're in for the last couple of years. If you look at how business has been for the last few years, and the knock-on of that is, as people have lost their jobs, is people have decided to become entrepreneurial and set up their own businesses. The recession is going to get a lot worse because of what's happened. Stuart, sorry, just addressing Stuart. It's going to get an awful lot worse, and an awful lot more people are going to lose their job, not just here, globally. That's just where things are. What we're looking at is a shakeout in business generally, and we're also looking at a seismic change in how certain businesses operate. We're looking at the end of retail as we've known it. We're probably looking at the end of the commercial retail sector, or the commercial property sector as we've known it. And there's going to be ones we haven't even thought about. That's just kind of where we are now. New jobs will come out. The other side of it, we're going to see more automation, a lot more automation. But again, that's good. All it'll mean is that more manual, more repetitive type jobs will disappear out, and there'll be more room for value to be added in roles. Now, for self-employed businesses, there's going to be an awful lot more of them. Business is still going to happen. There is this fear a lot of people get when they're hearing that this could be the biggest recession since 1929, and it almost certainly will be. They're not wrong about that. At the same time, if you go back then, the unemployment rate ran into the 20s, which is astronomical, but there was still 70 to 80% of the workforce was still working. So there's still going to be business. We still need to eat. We still need our phones to work. We still need clothes. We still need support to communicate as marketeers to business or to other businesses that there are services they might be interested in. People still need to do accounts. IT networks still need to be looked after. So there's still going to be business. So there are opportunities. And the thing that the self-employed have is nimbleness. They're able to react. I don't know, Stuart, if you've worked in large corporations. I have. And mother of dear God, trying to get anything done. I mean, you're just walking around with relentless millstones hanging off you. As a self-employed person, you're way more nimble. In fact, if anything, your biggest issue is your customers, who might be a lot slower. Now, if you're delivering into a growing sector, which is more maybe on the M side, then they're going to be more nimble than the larger players. So you may actually find that that they're more willing to engage with you because they need something done. They need it done today. The other side is with the sheer amount of unemployment which is coming, or actually, sorry, I'll rephrase that. The sheer amount of job losses which are coming, entities which have let all these people go will still need those jobs done. And what you will see is they will end up having to outsource and employ somebody in to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that if you get laid off as the marketeer of an entity, they're going to hire you back on a freelance basis. They'll probably hire somebody else because they'd be too embarrassed to do so. But that doesn't mean you can't go and do that same role somewhere else.
No, of course.
So there are opportunities. The key thing is to be nimble. The fact that this channel exists at all talks about the nimbleness of Tim and Seb. Okay, this is the kind of things you do. You've got to be nimble. And that applies to us all.
No, it's very true. It's very nice way of looking at it. I guess the benefits of being self-employed is that you can, see, movements in your business and see what the market's doing and adapt quite quickly. You're a lot further ahead than you would be, I guess, most employees. So that's very true. We've got a good question here from Samantha. So she has said, what are the risks and penalties of accounting about finding mistakes in the UAE? I'm sure there's a lot. So
yeah, there's a long list. Yeah, there's a long list, and it's available. You can go onto the FTA's site, and they will give it to you. But the short and narrow of it is, it's 10,000 dirham for not keeping proper records, and that's for the first instance. It's 50,000 the second time for mistakes made per incident. So for every time you get it wrong, it's 3,000 to 5,000 dirham. Think about it. Every time you go through the lights at 160 kilometers an hour, it flashes, and you get a fine every time that flashes. It's the same thing with these penalties. The bigger penalties are, and I do warn people about this, there are those who think they can treat the Federal Tax Authority who run VAT like another supplier. and they go, well, I'll just pay them late. No, they're not another supplier. They charge you 1% per day. It'd be cheaper to pay the VAT man on your credit card, incur the 2.5% credit card fee, and pay your credit card back. It's still going to be cheaper than not paying the VAT man. Just pay the bloody VAT man, and don't try and short change him. He will catch you, and it is poisonous once they're crawling all over you and they realize that you've been trying to screw with them. Just don't do it. It is honestly not worth it. Of all the people to complain with, leave the VAT man alone. You don't want to get into an academic discussion of, well, how much will it cost me if I go down that road? Just don't go down that road. Don't consider it. Let that be the one person you settle your bill with.
This is almost like a real life story of David and Goliath. You being David and Goliath being the VAT man.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mess with the taxman. Not a yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. No, I'm happy to argue a technical point with them, and they don't mind if you do. That's okay. Remember, it's new here, so the law is evolving, and if they think you've got a good point, they'll play ball with it. I mean, they're not unreasonable people, but most things are very clear.
There we go. Thank you for that. Another question here. Serena says, what are your thoughts on how we are going to spending our money over the next year following the pandemic for those who are able to stay in the UAE? Do you see businesses needing to lower their costs very much for their products and services? And will this force many businesses to close instead? So I'm assuming that's probably centered around profit margins and things. Like, do you think people are going to have to cut their costs to stay, I guess, afloat? I guess that depends on the value that your current customers give your products. It's quite an expansive question, I guess. But
yeah, it is. Okay, I'll break it down. Hi, Sabrina. How are we going to be spending our money? Well, in one way, we're going to have more money to spend because let's be honest about it. The cost of rent has gone down. It's gone down a lot. The cost of some products has gone down. There are more bargains to be had. There's much more haggling to be done, and more purchases are being done online. And that again makes sense. Why go down to the shops to buy it? And I talked earlier on about we are seeing the end of retail as we've known it. My own view has been for the last few years that, and I was 5 years. For 5 years, I was CFO of one of the major retail groups here, operating here, Lebanon and in Europe, and you could see it. The high street was dying because people were buying online. The country who's furthest ahead is Britain. Its high street is pretty much on its last legs, and they should, quite frankly, just let the damn thing go, because it'll get replaced. The market will replace. But what will it replace it with? Well, I was listening on the radio the other day, and Ace Hardware, I think it's Ace Hardware, or one of the IT stores are doing is you can order the goods online, and then you drive up and they'll just walk it out to your car and give it to you. So what you're actually going to see is stores will likely become showrooms. So when you walk into a store, on the walls will be all the different products that they sell, but just one of them. And there'll be people there to talk to you about the product. Then you'll go home and buy it online, because that'll be cheaper for them to have one central store that does fulfillment, rather than have lots of stores with lots of product. It's also greener in a weird kind of way.
It is, yeah, you're right. More efficient.
Think about the online food delivery business. You may or may not be aware of this, but you have these central kitchens, and I've dealt with somebody who is in this game. So I decide I'm going to open up Dave's traditional Irish food. What I do is I come up with a menu. Okay, I come up with a concept from a marketing point of view. I then go to this central kitchen and go, guys, can you cook me these dishes? And how much will it cost? We then agree that. Okay. I then do a separate deal with Deliveroo. So now what I have is I've outsourced the whole production of my offering, which is the food, to a central kitchen, which, by the way, is probably doing this for maybe 20 different companies. Deliveroo, I've outsourced my logistics. I probably got another company I got in to actually do my website. I've probably got a call center I've outsourced the number thing. So I actually don't really have a lot to do other than keep an eye on the business, keep the menu refreshed, and keep an eye on the marketing. Because I've got this central kitchen, which is cooking foods for 20 different restaurants in a central location. I've got Deliveroo coming in, picking it up and delivering it. I've got somebody who's built me an engine, a white label engine, which I then just rebrand. And then I probably work with a marketeer to make sure that my branding message makes sense. It's legal. Very important to make sure things are legal. That's really important. Don't forget that it must be legal. People forget about that, and then you grow the business in that form. And what you do is you get the net position between the cost of producing the food, the cost of delivery, and other associated selling costs from marketing and a treasury, i.e. a cash fulfillment basis. So I think we're going to be seeing more purchases of that type. We're going to see more of it go offline. Now, what does that mean for a country like the UAE, where we've just got endless amounts of malls? They're going to evolve. I mean, one of the ones which I know was evolving was Meydan Mall. Meydan Mall's focus was very much more on entertainment. So now you're going to go to the mall because it's got the best computer game arcade in the world. It's got some really it was going to have, I think, the larger ski dome than the one in Mall of the Emirates. That type of thing. So it's changing. It's changing the nature of what it's putting up to try and attract customers. Now there'll always be stores which require walk-in because there's different types of consumers. But for the best part, there's no reason why you can't buy most things online and fulfill them online. Sorry, I think, Sabrina, that's probably the first part of your question. Do you see businesses needing to lower their costs very much? Businesses always need to lower their costs because you've got to stay competitive. You've always got to continually try and find savings in your business, so therefore you can stay competitive in the marketplace. Remember, technology is changing, so the cost of delivering something from year to year can go down because of evolving technology. Robotic process automation is a great example of that. We're working with a major group in the region. They do 13,000 supplier invoices a day. 13,000 a day. Okay, supplier invoices. Okay, they're a massive regional company. They get 13,000 invoices a day. We are working with them to automate that whole process. Okay, imagine how that's going to work. That means that army, and I assure you it's an army of people who are involved in that, they will disappear. All of them. Gone. Gone. Every one of them. Gone. Not required. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a heartless bastard who's trying to get people into a situation where they'll starve. All that means is that entity has now got a competitive edge. All its competitors will catch up in time because they'll spot what's happened. But that will then put money back into your pocket because prices will go down, because competition will drive back down the price, which means you have more money, which means you'll spend it on other things, which means these people who lost their jobs there will find jobs elsewhere. Okay, that's the business. Okay, and keep that in mind. So don't feel bad when you hear thousands of people have lost their jobs, because if it is in the name of efficiency, well, they'll find them elsewhere.
No, it's very true. And I think, going back to what Sabrina said about, lowering your price to stay ahead of the competition, I think, like you said, that's important. So I guess if people can just find ways to add more value to what they currently do, that's probably a better approach first. Don't just slash your prices. Just look at, everyone keeps going on about how you should just pick up the phone, speak to your customers, find out what their problems are at the minute, see if your product is still relevant. Is your service or solution still fixing a problem at the minute? And if it isn't, pivot. That's what this entire group's about, right? So
yeah.
But anyway, so David, thank you so much for your time there. I think we're going to wrap up the chat there. Before we go, how do people get in touch with you? Should they want to have your expert advice and get you involved with their business? How do they go about getting in touch?
Drop me an email, david.daly, DALY, @gtag.ae, or I'm on LinkedIn, David Daly, or through our website, or just give me a call.
Fantastic. It's also in the Academy group, guys, so as well, just tag David in a comment, and he can always jump on and speak to there as well. Thank you, David. We look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Anyone that is watching this after it's not live, feel free to put a question in this video. We can bring it up in the next talk. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. Good night.